Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Funke Afolabi Brown. So, do you dread those middle of the night visits from your toddler? Or are you one of those that just completely enjoy those nighttime visits? Most likely, you probably fall in the first category. So, today we're going to be talking about what to do with those nighttime visits from your kids. And I'm going to just go through some helpful steps or tips that would help you to get over that and get them to stay in their room, not only to stay in their room, but to sleep independently, to sleep through the night, right? Because who doesn't want that? So I'm going to start by letting you know that waking up in the middle of the night is completely normal. Nobody technically sleeps through the night. Because what happens is that we go through cycles of sleep. We go through what you call light sleep, we call another stage of sleep deep sleep, and then the last stage of sleep is dream sleep or your REM sleep. And we have them under two broad categories, and not to go into a rabbit hole here, it's like non-REM sleep, which is that light sleep and deep sleep, and then there's the REM sleep or REM sleep, which is that dream sleep, right? And so in between those sleep cycles, we actually have what you call arousals or very brief awakenings, and most times you're not aware of them. They're really so subtle, but then it happens maybe 4 to 6 times at night. And so also our children. And so waking up in and of itself is normal. The issue is what happens when they wake up. Do they need you to fall asleep? Do they come yelling out for you? Do they come out of their room and ask you to come back into the room with them for them to resume sleep? And how much is that disrupting their daytime function and their sleep quality? And so that's where the issue really lies. So if you have a toddler who is having those multiple visits at night, listen to this, because I think you'll be able to take one or two of the steps or even all of them to figure out what would work for you. So the first step is to really figure out why they need you to go back to bed. Why are they having those visits? And one of the most common is that there might be an association. So if, for instance, you have a toddler or a child who needs you to fall back asleep, who, constantly needs you rubbing their back or rocking them, or needs you grabbing a bottle or a sippy cup for them to fall back asleep, then that's an association. That's what we call a sleep crutch. And to have an association in and of itself is okay if the sleep association is healthy. And what does that mean? So if, for instance, they still use a, pacifier or a binky, and it falls out of their mouth at night, and then they have those normal awakenings, but then have a hard time falling back asleep, and they wake up and they grab their binky and they keep sleeping, that's okay. Or, their blanket or something, and they could grab it and put it back on. That is fine. But if there needs to be some kind of human association, then we need to break that association. And so what does that look like? Say, for instance, does your child need to be nursed to sleep? Does your child need a bottle? And so you're giving them multiple bottles of milk over the course of the night. Then what I recommend is really trying to get them to fall asleep on their own without needing that. So if it's a bottle, then you want to give them the bottle if they need it, or the sippy cup, but you want to do it in such a way they're not falling asleep with it. So that's number one. It's break the association. Another example of that is if, say, for instance, they need you to rub them on their backs or to rock them, then we want to gradually start fading that away from their sleep. In that sense, they are learning to sleep on their own, so that way when they wake up in the middle of the night, which is normal, they will be able to say, oh yeah, I woke up the last time I fell asleep on my own. I didn't need mom, and I didn't need my bottle, and here I am, I'm just going to fall back asleep. Right? So that's one. The second is honestly deciding what your plan is in terms of those nighttime awakenings. So you feel it's not necessarily an association or whatever that is, or maybe it is, but you've tried to separate that association, but they're still kind of waking up. My recommendation is then to see what is your plan and how do you stick with it. So for kids who need their parents, for kids who come to visit a lot at nighttime, there's so many things you can do. You may have heard of the camping out method, where you may, potentially be in their bedroom for them to initially fall asleep and then slowly but surely start to make your way out of the room. And then the other one is, really returning them to bed, right? These are kids who potentially, of course, are now, maybe they're no longer in a crib and they're coming out of the room. They're running, making their way pitter patter to your bedroom in the middle of the night. You can actually return them to their room, and the key is sticking with it. So finding what works for you and planning that ahead of time, because at night it's really hard. Our guards are down, we're more vulnerable, we may feel more frustrated, and we may give in to things we typically would not give in to during the day. So whatever that plan is, whether you're going to stay in with them in the room for them to fall back asleep and then go back to your bedroom, and then hopefully then they're able to develop independent sleep on their own, as over time you slowly move yourself out of their bedroom. Or if you're going to be walking them back to their room, no matter how many times they wake up in the middle of the night till they get it, try to stick to that plan and find what works for you and stick with it. Then the third is really delving even deeper into making sure that you create time during the day to address what's happening to them at bedtime, right? Or in the night, in the middle of the night. So for instance, if they're coming to the room and they're saying, I'm scared, come and stay with me, there's a monster under my bed, a monster is back, or something of that sort, or I'm uncomfortable or something, anything, no matter what that looks like, I think it's really important to make time out to talk and say, hey, what's been going on? That's one, right? If they're able to tell you what their fears are, what their worries are, because get it, up to 60% of kids within that preschool age have nighttime fears. And even as high as 75 to 80% of school-age children. So this is not something uncommon at all. But it's important to try to address it, because if there's something on the line, if they have anxiety, if they have any, separation anxiety, for instance, if they have fears of the dark, if they have monsters, if they have all those things, then finding ways to address that, right? So if you notice they watch really active movies or horror movies or something that you feel may be disturbing their sleep and making them scared of those monsters, then really maybe eliminating that at bedtime would be helpful. But it comes from understanding what's going on, because if they have those fears, you acknowledge them. Of course, you're not going to make decisions based on those fears. You're going to try to address them. If they have anxiety during the day, you may need to have them see a counselor or whatever. But really trying to dig deep to say what is causing this and get into the bottom of it. Number 4 is one that I really like. It's the sleep fairy. And who is the sleep fairy? Now, the sleep fairy is cousins with the tooth fairy, who comes during the course of the night. We're not sure when. She goes from house to house and sees if kids stay in their bed all night long, okay? And if they stay in their bed all night long, you never know when she's going to visit. But guess what? If she notices that the kids stay all in their bed all night long, she leaves a special prize. So sharing the sleep fairy, depending on what your perspectives are, I think it's fun. It's it's something that you can use to get them to stay in bed, because then they're looking forward to getting a gift from the sleep fairy. Make sure this is not something too extravagant, a toy from the dollar store, a sticker, whatever it is, but really just applauding the sleep fairy, applauding the effort of your child staying in bed all night long. So that's the sleep fairy. Again, cousins with the tooth fairy, so you can figure that out. And then number 5 is you can use an okay to wake clock. What are those okay to wake clocks? They're very common. You could get them on Amazon. There's so many brands. And so what these are is, your toddler may not be able to tell time, right? They don't know if it's morning. So you saying go back to your room, it's not morning. Then every 5 minutes they'll be out and be like, is it morning? Is it morning? Is it morning? Right? They may not be able to tell the time. But if you have an okay to wake clock, it just changes color once it's time for them to leave their room, once it's morning, and you decide when morning is, right? So I would say if you have a child that wakes up like ridiculously early, say maybe 5 a.m. or something of that sort, or 5:30, you may want to set it to maybe 6 a.m. So you don't want to set it to 8 a.m., right? You want to set them up for success. So start off really close, and then from there, you could kind of build later, right? And so what that really means is that they don't get out of bed or they don't get out of their bedroom until it's time for them to come out when that okay to wake clock comes on, right? Once it changes color. So it could change from, say, red to green. So when it's green, then you can come out. So if they wake up in the middle of the night, well, it's not time. And then you do have to try to either tie that with some other reward or the other in the morning. And the thing about rewards is you have to be careful too, because eventually they may lose interest. And so you want it to be something that you can mix up, right? I think that's really something that would be helpful to make sure that they are engaged. Now, the last is, if you've done everything and you can't get them to stay in their room, or you feel like you can't, I think another thing, and depending on how tired you are, is how about this? You put a sleeping bag, a mattress, nothing too comfortable, right, on the floor in your bedroom. So when they come, they're not waking you up. They could just go in, lay down, that's it till morning. And that is okay too. So regardless of where you are, don't feel like, it has to be perfect. If you're too tired to keep returning them back and forth, and you don't want them waking you up in the middle of the night, then absolutely doing that is an option. Now, to just round this all up again, I want to emphasize the fact that it's important to figure out why your child is waking up. If it's an underlying medical problem, then all these strategies is not fair, right? If your child is waking up because they have pauses in their breathing during sleep, or they have maybe restless leg syndrome, or they have some other thing or the other going on, then you want to address that. So we're setting them up for success. So again, don't feel alone. Don't feel like there's no options. There are things you can do. There are things that you do need to pass on to your doctor, who may refer you to a sleep specialist. And then we can decide, is there sleep apnea? Is there, are there sleep terrors? Is there restless leg syndrome? Are there things like that? There are tests we could do if we need to figure that out. Or if your child has anxiety, or they're having recurring nightmares, there are things that we can do. There are things we could do to address nightmares, like imagery rehearsal therapy, which is, it's a form of therapy to help kids who have nightmares. Or if they have a history of trauma or other fears, then connecting them to see a counselor or a therapist is definitely something that's an option. And so hopefully this has been helpful. If you have that child, that wants to visit at bedtime, I hope that you've gotten one or two things that can help. And if this has been helpful, I would love it if you like this video. If you hit subscribe, that way once I get out new content, you will be the first to know. And until next time, I hope you rest well.